Hello everyone, welcome to this edition of The Inside. I am Babler Jonathan. Today we're going to be analyzing a political idea presented by 4 political parties in 2016 as the solution to the political, socio-economic and security challenges that Cameroon is facing today. The idea is championed by the UPC, Manidem, CPP, PAP and MP3 political organizations and many civil society organizations including Stand Up for Cameroon and Mothers of the Nation. Mothers of the Nation is an arm of Stand Up for Cameroon civil society platform. Meet our guest. In some few seconds, we're going to be analyzing political transition. Our guest today is one of the most outspoken and courageous politicians in the Republic of Cameroon. She is also a civil society leader. Kahbang Walla is the national president of the Cameroon People's Party, the Stand Up for Cameroon. She's also a member of Stand Up for Cameroon Civil Society Platform and Mothers of the Nation. Kahbang Walla, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here as usual. And hello to all of the viewers out there across the nation of Cameroon.
All right, we're going to start with some issues that were in the news this week. And one of the issues is a decision of the Minister of Territorial Administration, Tanganji Paul, who decided that all persons who will desire to purchase machetes, axes and iron rods in the northwest and southwest regions of the country for the next 4 months will have to seek for authorization from the divisional officer of his or her area, and of course will have to present some identification documents including the national identity card and even the phone number, and will also have to show proof of the fact that the person is having a plantation or has a plantation that is for farmers. And those who want to buy iron rods for building will have to show building permits and other documents to the sellers before they will be served. What do you think about this decision?
I think that unfortunately, as usual, as we have seen them do for the last 4 years, our government is handling the problem in a manner which is superficial and ridiculous. The problem is not those who are committing violence in the northwest and the southwest regions. Many of them have guns. Did they get permission for those guns somewhere? Are the guns not worse arms than an iron rod or a machete or cutlass which is being used for the farm?
Some of the atrocities committed are committed with the aid of machetes, axes, iron rods that are used in fabricating local explosive devices and things.
This is true. However, the problem is that we have a problem on the ground which has not been resolved. You know, if you do not resolve the problem, and that some people have the intention to use violence, you can ban even wooden sticks. People can kill with their bare hands. So I think that rather than going to utensils which that population, this is a rural population, most of the people are going to the farm. When you start banning them from buying cutlasses, from buying hoes and so on and so forth, you frustrate them further. We know that where the population is today is because of the continuous frustration by government since this crisis started.
But the administrative order is not a ban. It contains a restriction.
It is ridiculous.
To control the sale and purchase of those.
Imagine if people, how many cutlasses are sold in a day in the market of Kumba or the market of Tiku or the market of Bamenda? Does the minister know? Because if, let us say, per day you are selling 50, 100, 200 cutlasses, and it has to go to the DO's office, so all the markets in that particular district, if people have to line up there, does he have staff at the DO's office to treat their requests? Is he sure that everybody who needs to buy a cutlass knows how to read and write? I mean, we always, since the beginning of this crisis, and this particular minister is one of the key people who caused this crisis, because he was one who insisted on holding a certain CPDM meeting on the 8th of December 2016. We will never forget. And he continues to aggravate the situation on the ground, instead of pushing his government to go to the real solutions, which we know are about dialogue, are about releasing prisoners, are about seeing how we can have a process to get to peace.
Are you saying that this administrative decision cannot help, cannot reduce the rate of violence?
I do not think that it will.
You heard a press conference earlier this week here in Walla. Stand Up for Cameroon Civil Society platform decrying the increasing violence, not only in the northwest and southwest, but also in the far north. Now, this decision concerning those two Anglophone regions, can it not help to reduce the number of atrocities being committed?
I do not think so, because I think those committing atrocities who have decided to engage in violence, which we decry, we think that those people will always find the means to carry out their violence. So the Minister of Territorial Administration, the job that he has to do is to go to the root cause of the problem, engage this population in dialogue, release prisoners, non-violent prisoners. He is going after cutlasses, but he has people in jail who never held so much as a stick in their hand, but who are in jail for 4 years today, and who committed no crime.
You're the one saying so.
No,
the government is saying that they committed crimes.
No, the people
even attributing names like terrorists.
The people who were arrested. We can never forget in this crisis. We can never forget the timeline. The Anglophone movement, all Anglophones who were protesting, who were demanding their rights, and so on and so forth. There was no violence from October 2016 to September 2017. So anybody who was arrested in that period did not hold a stick, did not hold a cutlass, did not hold a gun. But many of those people are still in jail. There are hundreds of people still in jail.
So how do we understand the fact that they are being referred to as terrorists?
I do not understand. I do not understand. And this is why we have demanded for the last 4 years to free those who have been arrested. You cannot continue to give a community such conflicting messages. You, the government, you say you are stopping people from buying cutlasses and so on and so forth. But you have a DDR program where you say that those who have held a gun, who have kidnapped people, who maybe have killed people, all they need to do is come and put down their gun, and you will accompany them to reinsert themselves into society. Still, you, the same government, you are holding in prison people who never held a gun, who never committed any act of violence. Those ones, they are still in prison. Still, you, the government, you refuse to dialogue with the community. But now you want to take away their tools for doing their farming.
Some of those people you are talking about have been judged and condemned.
Why?
With heavy.
Yes, with very heavy sentences, and it doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. It does not make sense. If you look at the BBC Machos, the Terence Pence, the Galim Ferry, Felix Conrad Chi, and all of those people, what violent act did they commit? There was no violence at that time. They committed no act of violence. So it is, the government keeps giving conflicting messages to the Anglophone population, which leads the Anglophone population not to trust this government, not to believe that this government has its best interests at heart. And that lack of trust makes it difficult to resolve this problem, especially when there is no real process on the table.
Some of the detainees, notably the leaders who were arrested in Nigeria and brought back into the country and detained, Isikwa Yutabi and the others, were protesting in court this week at the Center Court of Appeal over the fact that they have been denied access to their lawyers. What do you think about this? The case was, however, adjourned to the 17th of next month on grounds that a panel of 3 judges had been transferred to other courts, but they were protesting against the fact that they are not being able to meet their lawyers.
You know, throughout this Anglophone crisis, and including, I always talk about the extreme north, because these problems started with the crisis in the extreme north, and because we ignored what was happening then, we find ourselves still in this situation today. The government of Cameroon, the state of Cameroon, is the guardian of the law of Cameroon.
And the rights of the people.
The state of Cameroon cannot break the law. And the law of Cameroon says, no matter what crime you have committed, no matter how heinous that crime is, you have a right to legal counsel. So whatever thing you are accusing somebody of, that person has a right to legal counsel. Now, when the state of Cameroon stops people who are on trial from having access to their legal counsel, they are infringing upon the law, they are infringing upon a fundamental human right, they are infringing upon the Constitution of Cameroon. How do you expect citizens to have any kind of trust in such a state? I think these are the fundamental questions that we will get to when we talk about political transition.
Right. Before we talk about that, you were highlighting some major actions that should be taken by the government to open the way out of the troubles in the northwest and southwest regions of the country, and you were talking about the release of the detainees and other actions that government is supposed to take, according to you.
These are not new suggestions. We have been, the suggestions have been on the table for the past 4 years. They have been made by us as political actors. They have been made by civil society actors. They have been made by religious actors. Number one, release all of the prisoners linked to the Anglophone crisis. It is no secret for anybody. Aside from people who were protesting, who were actually protesting non-violently, we know that hundreds of people were arrested illegally with no justification whatsoever. Nobody can forget that period in 2017 when young men were just being picked up in the northwest and southwest for no good reason. And by the way, the arrests continue till today on that basis. So as long as you have people in jail who have committed no crime, whom you yourself have not even accused, there are people who have been in jail 3 years, 4 years, and who have not yet had a court appearance. So when government is breaking its own law in that manner, it cannot have the trust of the community. You cannot talk about building peace when you as a state are breaking the law. So that is number one. So release these prisoners and let the community have faith that there is goodwill on the part of government to actually solve this crisis.
Before you go to number two, one of the persons who was recently arrested in the same context of the Anglophone crisis is a journalist, Kingsley Njoka,
yes,
who was declared a terrorist at 110 degrees or something like that by the head of the communication department of the Ministry of Defense. And he declared that he is a terrorist, confirmed. They have checked his computers and discovered that he himself confessed that he was the coordinator of the Bui warriors and all of that. But later on, he rejected that through his lawyers and dragged the spokesperson of the communication department of the Ministry of Defense to court.
So first of all, when we, these are all the ways in which the current regime, the BI regime, has really lost its way, if not its mind. Because when you have a court case and you are party to that case, once that case is in court, you do not comment that case in public. Now we have the spokesperson for the military of Cameroon. First of all, that said spokesperson is completely disqualified. In any normal country, this spokesperson would no longer have his job because of the case of Ngarbu. Because this is the same person who stood in front of us and told us a series of lies about Ngarbu. A series of lies about Ngarbu.
And then they were not lies.
And then the report came out completely disproving him. So in any normal country, that person would no longer have his job. But the fact that, so that is point number one. So first of all, he's not qualified to speak as a spokesperson. But they have kept him in that job. Now, number two is that person now comes out. Who is he? When he is claiming that Mr. Njoka is a terrorist, is he the person carrying out the inquiry? Is he the judge? Is he the lawyer? Who is he? What is he talking about? He's talking about a case which is in court. He has no right to do that. When did he carry out the inquiry? He's claiming that there are things on somebody's computer on the basis of what? You know, we need to stop this nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. That the state of Cameroon, I do not understand what is happening in Yaoundé, because it is as if they have been infected by some kind of madness. You cannot have a whole country when the spokesperson of an army is speaking. That person is speaking on behalf of the entire country. So he cannot make a mistake to be accusing somebody of something which is, he has no proof. Because the case has not yet come up in court for us to have those elements of proof. He can only say Mr. So-and-so is accused of this. That is the extent of what he can say. When he says he has proof that he's a terrorist, my question is, he has that on the basis of what? As who?
All right, let's proceed to...
Okay. So the second point I was saying is this question of dialogue. And there are two levels of dialogue at this stage. You know, every day that the government wastes time, they make things more complex. There is one level of that dialogue to arrive just at ceasefire. Now, about 3 years ago, you could have that dialogue with a few small group of people, and all of them could declare ceasefire, and maybe you hope that the guns will be silenced.
Now there's so many groups.
But today there are so many groups on the ground that now ceasefire means going to ground, division by division, village by village, talking with the community, engaging the community in all of its components, and agreeing that first and foremost, no more shooting. No more shooting on the part of the army, no more shooting on the part of the ambas, and this is the role that the community is going to play so that there is no more shooting. And government to take an engagement to say, okay, in this engagement, we are moving our soldiers to this level, out of the daily lives of the community.
To the barracks?
And the community to be able to say, because of this, if we see this, we will denounce. You need to negotiate that now, right at the grassroots level, because you have allowed the situation to deteriorate to such a level. And every day, and this is our appeal today to Cameroonians as mothers of the nation, that we as Cameroonians must act, because we have spent our time appealing to government, appealing to the separatist fighters, and so on for the last 4 years.
For that level of negotiation to take place, the funds, the traditional rulers,
yes,
of course, will be part of the discussions will lead the people, will be expected to lead the people, but many of them are out of their villages, and government is now struggling to send them back, asking them to go back, and things like that.
I think, you see, do
you think that's going to be possible?
you have the funds. Funds are in different situations according to their villages. Some of them are in, I can say, in conflict with their population. Some of them have left their palaces because the palaces were burned by the army. So the situation of every fund is different. But the safety of the fund, as far as we can see today, is part of that community discussion and negotiation. Funds, by the tradition, at least in the Northwest region, contrary to what people believe, a fund is not a fund in and of himself. He is a fund because the people have decided that there should be a fund, and to make him a fund. And contrary to what people believe, in the traditional governance, there are a lot of rules and regulations. You are not an absolute monarch. There are a lot of rules and regulations, amongst which is that the fund must always care for the well-being of his people. So today, if these discussions are to happen, the situation of the fund and the things that the fund should be present, because the population will have things to say to the fund. In our tradition, we talk to the fund. It's not an absolute leadership. There are moments in the life of the village where the population can always address themselves to the fund. And I think that these populations have things to say to their funds. And then we can talk about what needs to be done, what reparations need to be made to be able to get back to a situation, at least a situation of ceasefire. I said there are two levels, because there is one level just to get to ceasefire, and then the second level now to resolve the underlying problems. And that dialogue is a dialogue which must start at that village level, but which must now move to the national level, because it is a question of Anglophones, their identity, their place in this society, their need for an equal status as citizens of Cameroon. So it has to do with the nation itself.
It should start from below.
It has to start
and then
from below and move up.
And not from up?
No, it cannot. It has to be initiated from up. Only government can initiate what we are talking about. But when they initiate it, they go down to the grassroots level first.
And not call people in Yaoundé?
No, I mean, this, we said it at that time. I hope we're almost 1 year now from Grand National Dialogue. Yes, it's next month will be 1 year from when we did the Grand National Dialogue. And you will remember that we at Stand Up for Cameroon said this is a masquerade and we will not participate in it. We were invited, we refused to participate in it, because you cannot build without a foundation. You have not put a foundation and you want to build something, it's going to fall apart. However, and you are building with people in Yaoundé who are not concerned by the conflict on the ground.
However, the government is progressing with its with the recommendations of the national dialogue, the implementation of the spatial status reconstruction, and so on and so forth. We will not talk about that today. Let's proceed to this issue of you talked about the release of the prisoners, the dialogue.
Yes.
So after the dialogue,
we have said dialogue to obtain ceasefire, and then have a national process of dialogue starting from the ground up to resolve the fundamental issues which created this crisis, because those issues remain unresolved. The question of the Anglophone identity in the nation called Cameroon, the question of Anglophones as equal citizens in the nation called Cameroon remain unresolved. The questions of marginalization remain unresolved. And most importantly, the question of how are we going to be governed going forward? This crisis came about because of a demand for autonomy from the base.
All right, and you of the CPP, the Cameroon People's Party, Stand Up for Cameroon, Mothers of the Nation, the PAP, the UPC Manidem, and others think that this can only happen after the political transition, because the people who are in power now cannot take us out of these troubled waters. We're going to be talking about political transition in a moment. Time for us to take a look at what the newspapers reported this week. The press review by Immaculate Fogwe.
The Sun reports about the ongoing killings in the conflict-hit northwest and southwest regions, with the recent one being that of Comfort Tumasang, who was brutally murdered in Makanga Quarter, Muyuka subdivision, southwest region of Cameroon. The Guardian Post says another video of a man's head being chopped off with the aid of an axe by suspected separatist fighters surfaces on social media. The Guardian Post writes about the military's invasion in several localities in Muyuka few hours after the killing of Comfort Tumasang. This led to the arrest of several persons. According to the Cameroon Insider, the atrocities committed in the two English-speaking regions of Cameroon has led to widespread condemnation across the board. The Herald Tribune describes the treatment meted on ex-separatist fighters by the Disarmament, Demobilization and Reintegration Committee to that of kings and queens. Another edition of the Guardian Post says Minad boss Paul Atanganje restricts the sale of machetes and iron rods in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon.
Thanks, Immaculate Fogwe, for the press review. Now we're going to talk about political transition. This is an idea that was presented by 4 political parties in 2016 as the solution to the political, socio-economic and security challenges that Cameroon is facing. And I told you at the beginning of this program that today it is championed by the UPC, Manidem, CPP, PAP and MP3 political organizations and many civil society organizations, including Stand Up for Cameroon and Mothers of the Nation. And a member of Stand Up for Cameroon and Mothers of the Nation, national president of the CPP political party, is with us today. Kahbang Walla Edit, can you tell us something about the origin of this idea of political transition in Cameroon?
The idea of political transition for Cameroon is actually, we cannot at Stand Up for Cameroon say that it is we were the creators of the idea. This idea is actually very old in Cameroon's political history. At the time of independence, already UPC as a party talked about the idea of a refounding of the nation, redefining the foundation of the nation. Let us remember that UPC said reunification first and independence second. They wanted the opportunity for what was then East and West Cameroon to come together and discuss how they were going to live together. UPC at the time recognized that those who had been under British colonization and those who had been under French colonization needed to sit down and discuss how is it that they were going to actually cohabit and integrate these two ways of seeing the governance of the country. That conversation has still not taken place to where we are today. There has never been a point in the history of Cameroon where we actually sat down and said, okay, this is the way that things are done in the Anglophone part of the country. This is the way that they are done in the Francophone part of the country. And how do we bring them together? How do we actually enable these systems to cohabit? That discussion as a popular, large discussion has never taken place. So that was already the UPC idea at the time of independence. Then we get to the early 90s. You remember the cry in the early 90s was for a sovereign national conference. A sovereign national conference, once again, the fundamental idea there was that we need to rebuild the foundation of the country. The foundation is rotten. And today, we came up with political transition. It's an idea that really we began to conceptualize since 2014, and in 2016 we brought it out into the open and began to talk about it in the Cameroonian public. And it is the idea that due to our history, due to colonization, due to the fact that we have never been in any system of governance except dictatorship. We have had one dictator as Ahijo, and then we had a second dictator as Mr. Biya. Due to those elements, we cannot make a change of people. Say, okay, now today you are replacing this one who was sitting here, and then go on. No. The foundation of the country needs to be redefined. We have to talk about, one, what is the nature of the state? The nature, before a lot of people talk about form of the state, but we need to talk about the nature of the state, meaning what is the relationship between the citizen and the state? In Cameroon, many people do not know what it is. When you talk to people who are in the armed forces, they believe their role is to protect a government. Many civil servants tell you that, no, I'm here, I cannot criticize the regime because I am here, I'm working under that regime. That is incorrect. That is incorrect. The role of the state is to be at the service of the people. The role of the armed forces is to protect the people, even against the government if need be. So the role of a government is first and foremost to serve its population, not any particular group of people who are in power. So the idea of political transition says we have a history that is a history of oppression. Oppression by the colonizer, oppression by those who have ruled us after independence. We have never had the opportunity to have a state where that government is actually at the service of the citizen that we are. So we must sit down, put this history on the table. And one of the many of the things in this history are unknown to many Cameroonians. We do not know what happened in the war for independence, where today we estimate somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 Cameroonians who died. In the western regions, in the littoral regions, we do not exactly know what happened.
In the Maquis days.
We need to examine that. We do not know the history between Anglophone Cameroon and Francophone Cameroon. This crisis is one of the things that is the lack of knowledge on that history that is at the center of this crisis. And as we see now in the crisis, everybody is coming up with their own version of the history. We need to sit down as a country and say, look, this is actually what happened, and mistakes were made. It is important for a country when serious mistakes have been made that have aggrieved a portion of its population. It is important to acknowledge it and to understand it and to say, well, how did we get here, so that we can correct as we go forward.
No, before we
this
go
is
forward,
the idea of political transition.
Before we go forward, you're referring to the first president of Cameroon and the second president,
yes,
Amadou Ahidjo and Paul Biya, as
yes,
dictators.
Yes.
And you're saying that they have been oppressing the people of Cameroon.
Of course.
But these are people who have been repeatedly or were repeatedly elected in elections qualified as democratic. President
Qualified
Paul
by
is,
whom?
Is running another mandate, which he says he was elected democratically by the people. So
no,
why are you calling them dictators?
I think that it is clear that not only in Cameroon but in many African countries, dictators have been able to make elections an instrument that keeps them in power. From the moment when you are talking about somebody being in power for 38 years, that person has not been able to deliver water to the population. That person has not been able to deliver electricity to the population, has not been able to deliver education, to deliver health care. That person has managed the cities of Cameroon such that, like yesterday when we had rain in Walla, we end up being completely flooded and overwhelmed by the situation. Rain which occurs every year and which every single year we are overwhelmed by the situation. So you realize that for that kind of leader to stay in power so long, you have to ask yourself, what has happened in the mechanism? In Cameroon, I am a political leader. I cannot tell you the number of times I've been arrested. If you ask me what were you arrested for, I cannot answer you. I was arrested because I was expressing my political opinion, because I was carrying out non-violent political action.
And other political leaders of the opposition
we are just coming from a period where we had an entire political party in the leadership of the political party in jail for close to 1 year.
And it's close.
Yeah.
It's not.
So we are living in a state of dictatorship. In a dictatorship, democracy. I steal this from, I read it yesterday on the internet. Democracy, by definition, means that you accept dissent. You accept somebody who does not think the same way you do. You accept somebody who has a different conception of the society than you do. So in Cameroon, when you have a different conception than the BR regime, you are always at risk. There are simple indicators. People are afraid of us as opposition leaders. Can I tell you that I have been asked to leave public spaces because the owner of the public space, a restaurant or so, is afraid that if I'm seen in their restaurant, then it will mean that they are of the opposition and they are afraid of what that will mean to them. This is by definition a dictatorship. All right. You cannot say you are living in a democracy and people are afraid. Some people are afraid to greet me. Some people are afraid to extend their hand, and they will whisper, "Oh, I saw you there, but you know there were a lot of people around, so I was afraid to greet you." So if you have this kind of fear in a population, then you know that you are in a dictatorship.
The fear of being targeted for identifying
with a different political opinion. That's all.
All right, let's talk about the content of the political transition that you are proposing to Cameroonians today. What is inside that political transition?
So as I've said, the idea people should retain is that political transition means rebuilding the foundation of the country. Now, I will talk about 4 key steps. Step 1 is that the current regime must go. That is a difficult step sometimes for people to get their heads around, but you cannot rebuild the foundation of a country with the people who have installed dictatorship and who are hanging on to it with all their means, with all the violence, with all of the power and all of the money that they have.
The current regime
current regime must go.
How?
Through non-violent action of the population. This is nothing new. We have seen it in Burkina Faso, we have seen it in Tunisia, we have seen it in Algeria. When people come out, we, the people, by the constitution of Cameroon, are the power, the ultimate power in the country. And when we come out and say we no longer want you, please, non-violently, pack your bags. 38 years is enough. we are putting an end to this now.
Is it in the same vein with what happened in Mali recently?
Mali
the
is...
army and the people came together and said, Mr. President, we want you out.
We will have to have a discussion about Mali because Mali is a little bit more complex, because the army played a major role in Mali. So we could have a discussion about that. But it is the people coming out to say no longer. I think the examples of Burkina Faso, of Tunisia, Sudan, because we believe in civilian rule. Civilian rule. In the groups who are in political transition, we are not talking about rule by the armed forces. The armed forces in a nation must always be under civilian rule.
Now, to have step 2, we must have step 1.
Yes.
Are you sure this can work? The people standing up, peacefully protesting and saying, Mr. Biya, President Paul Biya, leave the Unity Palace. Mr. PM, leave your office. All those people who are walking around him should give way to new other political leaders. Can we have that in Cameroon?
I am absolutely certain that it will happen. One of the things we do is talk to those in the countries where it has happened. And the thing that they consistently tell us is that everybody used to ask that question that you have just asked. That is it possible? Can you imagine that in Egypt, that in Tunisia, that in Burkina, that in Algeria, you can have the people coming out to demonstrate in this way? And the answer is yes, of course.
But knowing the repressive way in which the forces of law and order, security and defense respond to such actions.
All of those countries were more repressive than
Somebody
Cameroon.
will just say, but my child, my wife,
how
am I going to do this thing?
All of those countries were more repressive than Cameroon. And here's one thing that I would say. We hear very often, my child, my wife, my job. I think people in the Northwest and Southwest also used to say that. When we used to talk, because we were talking about political transition long before the Anglophone crisis.
Of the crisis.
And when we used to talk to people in those regions, they say, oh no, you know, this is... But the longer we wait, the more political transition is a non-violent solution. It is a solution which is controlled by the people. It is a solution which is positive in that it is about building up the nation. If we do not take our responsibilities and go on that positive route, there will be people in the society who will decide to take it in a different route. And we have already seen that in parts of Cameroon. So if we had had people from Northwest and Southwest standing up to say, yes, we want political transition, we want to move in this direction, maybe we would not have the crisis that we have today. So it is very important for us as Cameroonians to build the non-violent solution, build the positive solution, because the longer we wait, the more we have groups on our territory picking up arms. And when groups pick up arms, you lose control.
I listened to a young entrepreneur, a young Cameroonian entrepreneur who told me, if you don't do what you know you can do, what you know will do you.
Exactly.
All right, step 2.
So step 1 is the regime, difficult step, but an important step for we as Cameroonians. Step 2 is what we call a true national dialogue. The true national dialogue is about dealing with our history, dealing with our colonial past, because whether it is the war against independence, that period of what we call the Maquis, or it is the Anglophone crisis, these are crises from our colonial history. We were not Anglophones and Francophones. We were colonized to be Anglophones and Francophones. So we must sit down as Cameroonians and ask ourselves, who do we want to be going forward? How do we take that history and live together. You know, I hear a lot of the current regime has a slogan, vivre ensemble, vivre ensemble.
Living together.
It's not a slogan. Living together is not a slogan. It is a construction. We have to sit down and we have to say, look, this is the way we do things here. This is the way we do things here. What do we want to do going forward? Does each person keep their system? Do we have a blended system? Do we have a completely new system? These are the questions we have to ask ourselves as Cameroonians. So the national dialogue is about putting our history on the table and then building our future and making decisions about, as I have said, the nature of the state, the form of the state, key institutions. We have to reform the legal system, the judiciary system, and the balance between the judiciary, the executive, and the legislative. Today, many Cameroonians do not know the excessive power of the executive is inscribed in our constitution. So we must have this true national dialogue and then rewrite our constitution. On the basis of the dialogue, we now reform the institutions. We must rewrite the constitution. We must redo the electoral law. We must redo, we must reform institutions such as the armed forces. We should never ever again be a country where when the average citizen sees a policeman, he is scared. Because that is the reality of Cameroon. We are seeing it today in its extreme form in the zones of conflict. But the reality is that even in Yaoundé or Walla, when a Cameroonian sees a policeman, instead of being reassured that I am now in the presence of somebody whose job it is to keep me safe and secure, when a Cameroonian sees a policeman, he's wondering, oh, what is this guy going to do to me? So we have to reform those institutions.
And the issue is about merging some of those difficulties, some of those realities in both sides. For example, in British Southern Cameroons, in former British Southern Cameroons, police people were not seen moving around on the street with guns.
Absolutely. And
but on the other side, it's a normal
exactly
thing, and that's what has been deported to the other side.
Not only do you have the normal side, but you have a very important point in the history is the gendarme. This force, which is between the army and the police, because the police is a civilian force. It is there for law and order in the community. The army is an external force which is supposed to fight anybody who is attacking you as the country. Now, in the what we adopted from the French, you have this gendarme who is the intermediate force, so who is a violent force existing within the community. This does not exist on the side that was colonized by the British. There was just simply no force known as a gendarme force. So these are the questions we should sit down and discuss together. Today, the British remain one of the countries in the world where a policeman does not carry a gun. Only, I think, about 4% of British policemen carry guns. So we should ask ourselves as a society, do we need police to carry guns?
Of course.
Or can we create a force which is there for the community, which is there to enforce law, and which is not a violent force? These are the questions for the national dialogue.
Step 2 and step.
So we go to step 3 now.
Step 3 and step 4.
Yes. So
before that, we're going to take some interviews, and when we come back, we'll look at step 3 and 4 of the political transition proposed by Stand Up for Cameroon, Mothers of the Nation, CPP, PAP, UPC Manidem, and other civil society leaders.
Four years of no school is not 4 months or is not a third-term holiday. Let me use this opportunity to call on the elites, external and internal, to support this move. Contribute in cash, in kind. Contribute so that our children will have themselves back in the classroom. We have suffered enough, and it is time for us to stop this nonsense. I think we should not use our children as sacrificial lambs no matter what is going on. This is a zone that counts 16 primary schools and 2 colleges. So you imagine the number of pupil and student population that have been sacrificed for all these years. So I'm here as they invited me, and at the same time let me equally use this forum to send a strong message to those our elites, especially those who are abroad, who spend their time discouraging, preaching against school, or threatening the lives of their own brothers back at home. It is time for them to desist and follow the path of righteousness. The sensitization has intensified because of the traditional authorities. They have taken the relay. Today I am in the Mba village following an invitation from the funds of the Mbuwa zone. They invited me today to come to Mba Palace to partake in their meeting. We have brainstormed and we have come out with so many strategies to ensure that this school year is successful.
We, the women of the Southwest region, are in deep shock and consternation following the brutal murder of a harmless and defenseless woman in Muyuka on Wednesday, the 12th of August, 2020. We consider the cold-blooded slaying of Timasam Comfort Aferi as an affront to womanhood and humanity as a whole. The women of the Southwest express unreserved indignation at this murder, which is one too many in the long list of senseless killings perpetrated by suspected separatist fighters. The memory of Florence Ayafo is still fresh in our memory. We stand up with one voice to condemn in the strongest terms ever this long list of brutal killings. We, the women living in the Southwest region, call on the government to spare no efforts or resources to track down and bring the full force of the law to be applied on the killers of Timasam Comfort Aferi, while inviting the population to give full collaboration to the security forces in their investigations.
The president of the court explained that because all three members of the panel have been transferred, they'll need time to reconstitute the bench and continue with the matter. But before the session ended, lead counsel Paddy Young and Batunier Etabison, they indicated that our clients were protesting the fact that they could not have access to their lawyers while incarcerated. And even though we understand that this is a coronavirus period where social distancing is very important, the constitutional and the fundamental right of our clients to be able to have access to their lawyers is primordial. And so they came, 9 of them in court today were present to physically protest the fact that they've not been able to have access to their lawyers. The second prong of that protest was the fact that Deacon Wilfred Tassan did not show up in court to manifest his protest against this very issue. Mr. Tabe was very, very insistent. He was very, very strong. He wanted the world to be clear about the fact that they wanted access to their lawyers. And this was put on the record, and we hope that the president of the court should be able to rule on this. We can tell you that they are strong, they are resilient, they are fighters like you know them, and they want the world to know that they are in good spirits and that the fight continues.
Mr. Yokotang was acting as a lawyer for Besem Blandin, who was killed in Tiku last week. And after discussing with the parents of the deceased, he was informed that one of the victims of the incident was a boy called Elijah, who was lying sick or ill at the Limbe hospital. So he thought it wise in order to complete his investigations and advise himself and for his client's sake, to come to Limbe to see Elijah. Besem Blanding was 17 years, and it would appear Elijah is 16. They are alleged to have been shot because they were doing snail farming with their torches and with their buckets. And after discussing with the young man who is in bed, in the hospital bed, he now decided to take a photograph. And it is at that juncture that the gendarmerie officers who were gathering the ward interrupted him and asked him to delete those pictures. He did so. He was asked to leave the hospital ward, and then he protested that he had not finished his discussion, and he shouldn't be, the ward is not a military barracks. Of course, the gendarme officer called his commander, who came, and after the explanations that were given, he asked him to go on to take what the photographs that he wanted to take. And then he said, okay, no, he wouldn't take it again because it looks like photographs is a problem. Then they said, why did he delete the ones that he took, and then that he should come to the gendarmerie office, the company. And that's how we've been here since 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock yesterday.
To support all the descent group in the mid division. You know, the exercise is not easy for them. That is why he thought necessary to send this small gift to them, to empower them and to permit them to work without any major problem. What I could note to openly say is that monthly they are going to have a small team. They will tell you exactly, those who are concerned, they are going to tell you. In general, we are trying to organize them because for sure alone, that the exercise will not be really easy.
We've got many pictures since this morning that are showing us how roads, houses, and farms are overloaded with floats. This lot of floats have made me decide to call my regional committee, who is going to face those difficulties with our populations. They told us that somebody was just in danger driving a caterpillar, and we sent the SDO there with a team. So they rescued that man. They have asked also population to build houses where they can be saved, but many of them went to tackle with the roads of rivers. And that's why today we are seeing how all those who have built in the place that were forbidden, we see how water is coming to rain and tell people that it is my place. We have to be careful when we are deciding to build a house somewhere here in Walla, and to also ask for a municipal certificate that is just allowing you to build. You know, many of them are built without authorizations. We are working so that many of them that are being surprised by these floods to come and see how we can give some solutions. The measure is to ask people to leave the place where they are overloaded with water, so where the floods are.
The source of the leakage of the examinations has been identified and those responsible ascertained. On this basis, provisional measures have been taken, suspending the culprits. The Director of the Office of Baccalaureate du Cameroon, Mr. Roger Etienne Minkulu, has been instructed to ensure the full application of the measures taken. The culprits will be handed over to the competent services of the state to answer for their obnoxious offenses.
Cameroon, like all countries in the world, has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Healthcare workers and those who support them on the front line in these health battles have not ceased to give of their times, energy, know-how, and to show their continuous determination to save lives. These collective efforts have enabled us to achieve a social better life that we are called to consolidate.
You're welcome back. Now we're talking about step 3 of the political transition proposed by some political leaders and civil society leaders in the Republic of Cameroon to solve the many political, socio-economic and security challenges that the country is facing. Kahbang, Walla edit step 3 of the political transition.
Step 3 comes directly from step 2. So the national dialogue, the decisions which are taken during the national dialogue are binding and then must be translated into institutional reforms. So coming out of the national dialogue, number 1, you must rewrite a new constitution for the country, because the decisions which you have taken now must be inscribed into the social contract of the country, which is the constitution. Secondly is that you have to begin, it is just the beginning in the transitional period, because you will have reforms maybe for 10, 15 years after you have gone through the transition. But you begin the most important reforms, which include the electoral system, which include the balance of power between the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative, which include questions of the armed forces. So you begin these reforms and you translate them into documents and systems which are binding for the country. So that means the constitution must change, certain laws must change, and the institutional reforms must be put into place. And step 4 is that you now hold an election based on this new electoral system. You hold an election for your first mandate after the transition. And many aspects of that mandate have already been defined. So those people who will be elected, they will not be free to just come and do whatever is their own political program, but they will be bound by what has been decided during the transition as part of that first mandate. So these are the steps of the political transition. And
now, where all of these will be going on,
yes,
who will be leading the country? For how long will it go on?
Great. Those are very good questions. Based on what we have seen, because once again, as we say, we are not inventing this. It is ongoing. We have seen it in countries like Tunisia and Burkina. It is ongoing today in Sudan. So we know that good transition lasts about 2 years, 1.5 to 2 years. Some people have said to us, no, but you need about 5 years to transition Cameroon. That is true. That is why we say it is the beginning. But you cannot keep a country in transition for too long, because that transition period is a stalemate period where you are sort of waiting. Many people will not invest in the economy. Many people will wait to see how the transition will work out. So you cannot keep it for too long. So ideally, it is a 1.5 to 2 year period. During that time, you have a transitional government. You have a government which is put into place consensually by those who have carried out step 1. The forces that have carried out step 1 of removing the current regime now sit down and agree on a transitional government. The transitional government are people who have certain characteristics. They must have, first and foremost, people who have proven love of the nation. So it's not on that day that you'll be looking for somebody to say, oh, this person said, no, I love Cameroon very much, I should be in the transitional government. No, you are basing yourself on the acts. We know today, for example, the lawyers who have always stood up for human rights in Cameroon. We know the politicians who have always stood up in Cameroon. We know the civil society actors who have always, based on that track record, we say these people have shown love of the nation and they can be part of a transitional government. Will the transitional government have leaders from all the institutions, the presidency, the prime ministry, the Senate? Yes, so the transitional government has generally we have two arms. You have an executive transitional government, and then you have a legislative body, which is kind of like a temporary parliament, which is in place. Those are the two key transition institutions. And one thing is important about the transitional institutions. If you are part of the transitional government, you cannot stand for the next election. You are automatically excluded from the next election. So these are not people with the political ambition of ruling the country. Their job is the transition. Exactly. Take the country through the transition, rebuild the foundation of the country, and then hold elections with a good electoral law, with a good electoral foundation, and now the new leaders of the country will be elected. So this also ensures that people do not create laws which favor themselves. It also ensures that people do not grab power to now install themselves in power. It means that you actually have this time to rebuild the foundation of the country. And there's a third element which Stand Up for Cameroon has developed, which is that during this time, to guarantee this process, we would have the advice and the counsel of 4 or 5 African leaders who have actually conducted democratic processes themselves in their countries. So we would be looking at the Jerry Rawlings, we'll be looking at the Thabo Mbekis, we'll be looking at the Grassa Machels, people who know what it means to transition a country and who would be acting as our advisors, because you know, amongst us as Cameroonians, we have not built very good trust and we don't have a very good history. So it's good to have those people who do not have a stake in the system, who would be able to say, hey, watch out, here you are going off. Yes, here you are, get back on track, and also sharing the experience of what they have been able to conduct in these countries. We are rounding up. You have some few seconds to look at this camera and speak to Cameroonians. Tell them what you expect from them. Good. Thank you. So our message to Cameroonians today is that the future of our country is in our hands. We as a people have to stand and trace the road which will build our future. That means that you have to join us in the movement to define what we want and carry out non-violent action. We insist on that. Non-violent action. There is so much violence in our country. We know that change needs to come. So the route is non-violent action. So we ask you today to stand up and to join us as we organize and mobilize for non-violent action to bring about political transition. Kahbang Walla, indeed National President of the CPP, member of Stand Up for Cameroon and Mothers of the Nation, thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much. It was a very, very interesting discussion on political transition. Thank you. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. Next Sunday, another edition will be coming up. Stay with us.